Pierre, thanks so much for your time. I mean, does the DA and the economic freedom fighters, which are also challenging President Ramaphosa's response, have a case in court here?
Well, it's a bit confusing because the presidency said that they took the decision in terms of Section 3.1 of the Act, but then to the DA or to the EFF, they said they did it in terms of Section 3.3. So they gave contradictory explanations, which is a bit odd. But if you look at the section, it allows the state attorney to deal with cases that is not directly based on a government business. What it doesn't allow is for the state attorney to pay the private attorneys of a criminal accused person. So it doesn't look, if that section is very badly written, but it doesn't look like that section actually allow the state or the state attorney to pay for the private lawyers of an accused person. They could have managed the case themselves, and then the state would have been responsible, but not to give the money to some other person to do, as is the case here.
I mean, and it also goes on about, you know, when it is in the public interest to provide such representation to a government. Confusing. You described this situation precisely, Pierre, because I feel the same. I mean, how do you think a judge will read this situation? Because in my layman legal eyes, it looks like the opposition and the EFF, or the DA rather, have a winning case against the state.
Yes, it's always difficult to decide before you hear the arguments in the court, of course. But on the paper, just on what we have now in front of us, there is at least an argument to be made that there was no legal authority for this decision. Because firstly, we don't know who took the decision. The presidency said it's the presidency took the decision, but they also say that it's the state attorney who took the decision. So there are so much confusion here that it will be not easy for the state to show that this was actually a decision that was authorized by the law.
Yeah, and of course the EFF also raising other matters involving public officials, that of the recent Duduzi Manana, who assaulted a woman there at Cubana, and situations like that also being possibly paid for by the state.
Yes, I think that therefore, no matter how you feel about this issue, I think it's actually will be very helpful for the court to give a final clear clarification on this matter. When can the state pay the legal cost, or can the state ever pay the legal cost of somebody who is charged with a criminal offense? And if so, in what circumstances? Because that is very important. Otherwise, taxpayers' money might be used for issues that really it shouldn't be used for, and it could not possibly have been intended to be used.
And I mean, the question about whether President or former President Jacob Zuma will actually pay back the money. I mean, we fought tooth and nail to get any form of movement on Nkandla. How do you see this scenario playing out if indeed he actually loses the cases against him in court?
Yes, so apparently this is not the first case in which the state pays somebody's legal fees in a criminal case. And then there's always an arrangement. If you lose the case, if you get convicted, you have to pay it back. The problem is often that this is not easy to enforce, because once you're if you are criminally convicted and you go to jail, you're not going to have the money to pay it back, especially if it's 15 million or 30 million rand. There are very few of us who have 30 million rand lying around. So it is often a kind of agreement that is not going to be enforceable because the person is not going to have the money.
I mean, Pierre, just a parting question. A lot of these battles between the ruling ANC and opposition parties over the Constitution and what it can allow and what it can't allow. I mean, this lack of or misunderstanding between all parties, does that mean that something is potentially wrong with the Constitution itself, given its ambiguity and the different meanings that it conveys to different parties?
Well, there's a joke that if you have two lawyers in a room, they have 5 opinions among them. So sometimes the law is not so clear, and sometimes people disagree about what the law is. And so often when there's a fight like this, it's because lawyers give different opinions. So that doesn't mean that the Constitution is bad. It just means that the courts have not given a good answer yet and a definitive answer to a specific issue. And once the court does give that answer, that should be the end of the matter, unless, of course, you get really bad lawyers who don't know the law, then they will still give you bad advice.
Well, let's hope that is not the case. I mean, I thought, like many South Africans, that under this new dawn, our court days would be over, but clearly not. Pierre, thanks so much for your time. That was constitutional law expert at UCT, Pierre de Vos.